Hi everybody, my name is Sarah Murphy. I'm a human development and family studies major, and the topic I chose is child abuse. So child abuse is a social issue we have in the world, and I'm going to talk about kind of why I chose it. So my career path is child life, so I want to work with kids, but I also have an internship right now with CPS. So I get to shadow a investigator, I get to shadow forensic interviewers, and just kind of see all the different aspects that go into what happens with different kinds of abuses. And I work for DFPS, which is Department of Family and Protective Services, but it's basically the same thing as CPS. And so yeah, it's kind of that. But I also wanted to talk about the cycle of abuse. So it first starts out with tension building, then it goes to the incident, so the actual physical or emotional or sexual abuse, then reconciliation, and then calm. And it's just an endless cycle, especially with the people that we deal with that come in after they have half the time they have case after case after case of several issues that have happened and claims through the alleged perpetrator or for the alleged perpetrator. And there's 13 types of abuse in the world, and a couple that I have here are physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, mental abuse, cultural abuse, grooming, criminal exploitation, child trafficking, and financial. Now, there are 7 categories to abuse, such as physical, domestic violence, sexual, verbal, psychological, emotional, and mental. And all of those are different. I will say one of the ones that I've seen the most through my internship is physical abuse, which is really sad, but that's typically how that goes. A lot of the time, if it's physical abuse or sexual abuse, that means that they will have a forensic interview, and a forensic interviewer will interview them and just kind of see if the kid will make an outcry. If so, then the CPS worker and the police officers will take it from there, and there will typically be a scheduled removal. And then whenever you do hear about any kind of abuse that's going on, typically people either don't react to it or they react by calling 911 and getting the police involved. And once the police are involved, they will notify Child Protective Services or DFPS. But another organization that helps children and kind of is an advocate for them is CASA and the advocacy centers. So we have some here in Nacogdoches. I know it's called the Herald House. That place is actually really cool because they host or hold a lot of forensic interviews there. And I've witnessed a couple of them, and they're actually really interesting. And I know everybody always wants to know, why does child abuse happen? Well, child abuse happens based off of the parents or any of the adults that's the alleged perpetrator due to mental illness, past trauma. So potentially if they were abused as a child, that's just what they think is the norm, or they just, because that's the trauma they have, they just think that that's just how they can react and use their anger. Also, lack of education. A young parent could potentially not know how to handle a child and results to physical blows. And cultural circumstances. So I put cultural circumstances because we had a case come in where this grandma, I'm not really sure what her reasoning was. She told us that it was a cultural remedy that they use, but basically she got an iron and held it to her grandson's stomach and pressed the steam. And so he had a huge iron mark on his stomach, and they obviously had an interview and they had to investigate the whole thing, and he did have a body examiner look at him, and they found past burn marks on his back and on his leg. So that's not okay. But the issue is they said that was a cultural circumstance, so it gets a little sticky. And then what does abuse do to children? So naturally, we all know abuse is horrible. It shouldn't happen, but it does unfortunately have lasting consequences. And abuse can be linked to cause physical, psychological, and behavioral consequences. So sometimes if you have a child who's being abused at home, they don't know how to cope, they don't know how to respond, they just kind of either lash out, and if they're getting hit at home, then chances are they're probably going to be in a fight or a couple of fights, or have just various altercations due to what their home life is like. And then anger issues also can come about from having that past trauma of being abused as a child. Abuse just holds a lot of issues, and it causes these kids to have lingering issues, and it can also cause issues such as bulimia and just suicidal thoughts and just really, really toxic, not great circumstances. And unfortunately, we see a ton of this in the CPS office that I intern at. And child abuse is just always been around. It'll never go away, unfortunately. But we can help by being aware of our surroundings and honestly just listening to certain things that kids tell us, especially if we are in a career field with working with children. So for me, if I'm a child life specialist, I'm working in the hospitals and a kid has an outcry, obviously I'm gonna go and I'm gonna document that and try and get them the help that they can, or that I can. But that is the end of my presentation over child abuse. And